Close your eyes and imagine the sound of 1,000 arrows whistling through the air at once, a noise often described by those who heard it as the rustle of a giant silk curtain being torn apart. Now contrast that with the bone-shaking roar of a 21st century railgun, or the eerie, absolute silence of a drone loitering miles above the clouds. For as long as humans have walked this earth, we have been obsessed with a singular, grim pursuit: the engineering of power. Every 100 years, like clockwork, a new invention emerges that completely rewrites the rules of existence. It makes the world smaller, the stakes higher, and the previous century's peak technology look like a child's toy. Today, we aren't just looking at a list of hardware. We are tracing the evolution of human ingenuity through the most formidable tools ever devised in every single century. Let's go back to the beginning of our recorded journey, the 4th century before the Common Era. While the sword and spear were the bread and butter of ancient conflict, the real game-changer was the gastrophates, or the belly shooter. This was the ancestor of the crossbow, and it was a mechanical marvel of its time. Imagine a bow so powerful that a human being couldn't pull the string back with their arms alone. Instead, you had to rest the stomach against a curved stock and use your entire body weight to winch the mechanism into place. This allowed for an incredible amount of stored energy. For the first time, a soldier didn't need to be a lifelong athlete or an elite archer to punch through the finest bronze armor of the day. It democratized force. The gastrophates changed the nature of sieges, allowing defenders to pick off targets from distances that were previously thought safe. It was the first step in a long journey toward removing the physical strength of the individual from the equation of power. As we move into the 1st century before the Common Era, the Roman Republic was perfecting a different kind of tool, the pilum. On the surface, it's just a javelin, but the engineering behind it was genius. The tip was made of soft iron, while the rest of the shaft was wood. When a Roman legionary threw this into an enemy's shield, the thin iron point would penetrate the wood and then immediately bend under its own weight. This made the javelin impossible to pull out and effectively turned the enemy's shield into a heavy, useless piece of junk. The opponent was forced to drop their protection right as the Roman gladius was coming for them. The pilum wasn't just about direct impact. It was about tactical neutralization. It was a weapon designed to solve a specific problem, and it helped the Roman legions dominate the Mediterranean for centuries. By the time we reached the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire was facing existential threats from almost every direction. Their secret weapon? Greek fire. This was the ancient world's version of napalm, and the recipe was so closely guarded that to this day, we don't know exactly what was in it. It was a liquid substance that could be sprayed through pressurized bronze tubes onto enemy ships. The most terrifying part? It reportedly burned even more intensely when it hit the water. Imagine being a sailor on a wooden ship, watching a stream of green flames arch across the waves toward you, knowing that jumping overboard wouldn't save you. Greek fire allowed the Byzantines to hold on to Constantinople for centuries longer than they otherwise might have. It was a psychological horror that ensured no fleet would dare enter the Golden Horn without a massive amount of luck. Fast forward to the 13th century, and the world belonged to the composite bow of the Mongols. While the bow itself was an ancient concept, the Mongols perfected the materials and the training. They used a laminate of horn, wood, and sinew that could store far more energy than a simple wooden longbow. These bows were short enough to be used from horseback, but powerful enough to fire over 300 yards. A Mongol warrior could fire accurately while moving at a full gallop, often using a thumb ring to release the string with surgical precision. The composite bow was the engine of the largest contiguous land empire in history. It allowed a relatively small population of nomadic warriors to dismantle the most advanced civilizations in China, Persia, and Europe. It was the ultimate mobile platform of its age. However, the 14th century brought a weapon that would eventually render the bow obsolete: the English longbow. At the Battle of Crécy and later Agincourt, the longbow proved that a disciplined line of archers could dismantle the most expensive, heavily armored cavalry in the world. A 6-foot piece of yew wood, pulled with a force of over 150 pounds, could launch a heavy cloth yard shaft that would penetrate chainmail and even plate armor under the right conditions. The sheer volume of fire was what made it the deadliest tool of the century. 6,000 archers firing 10 arrows a minute created a literal storm of iron. It changed the social order of Europe, as a commoner with a piece of wood became more relevant on the field than a nobleman on a $1,000 horse. But the real revolution was brewing in the East. By the 15th century, gunpowder had made its way across the Silk Road and was being housed in massive iron tubes. The siege of Constantinople in 1453 saw the debut of the basilic, an enormous cannon designed by an engineer named Orban. It was 27 feet long and could fire an 800-pound stone ball over a mile. It took 60 oxen and 200 men just to move it. This weapon ended the era of the medieval castle. For centuries, a thick stone wall was the ultimate insurance policy. The basilic proved that no wall was thick enough if you had enough gunpowder and a big enough pipe. This marks the beginning of the age of artillery, shifting the focus of power from the knight to the engineer. By the 16th century, the handheld firearm was becoming more reliable. The arquebus, and later the musket, changed everything. While early versions were slow to load and often as dangerous to the user as they were to the target, they had a terrifying effect. They were loud, they produced huge clouds of smoke, and they could penetrate the best armor of the day with very little training required for the soldier. This led to the creation of the Spanish tercio, a formation of pikemen and musketeers that dominated Europe for over a century. The musket was the ultimate equalizer. It didn't matter if you had spent 20 years training with a sword, if a 19-year-old with 2 weeks of training could bypass all your skill with a single pull of a trigger. Moving into the 18th century, we see the refinement of the field gun. Napoleon Bonaparte, perhaps history's greatest fan of artillery, used the 12-pounder cannon to reshape the map of Europe. He called artillery the beautiful daughter of war. The guns of the 1700s were more mobile, more accurate, and utilized standardized parts. They could be deployed in massive batteries to concentrate fire on a single point, literally blasting a hole in the enemy lines for the infantry to exploit. The 18th century field gun was the primary reason for the staggering casualty rates of the Napoleonic Wars. It was the undisputed master of the landscape, turning the open fields of Europe into a place where no one was safe. The 19th century, however, was where the Industrial Revolution met the art of conflict. If you had to pick one tool that defined this century, it would be the Gatling gun. Invented during the American Civil War, it was the first successful rapid-fire mechanical gun. By using multiple barrels and a hand-cranked mechanism, it could fire hundreds of rounds per minute without overheating. It represented a fundamental shift in the volume of fire. Suddenly, a small group of soldiers could hold off an entire army. The Gatling gun, and its successors like the Maxim gun, were the tools that allowed European powers to colonize vast swathes of Africa and Asia. It was a weapon of such overwhelming force that it made traditional courage on the field almost irrelevant. Then we hit the 20th century, and the scale of destruction becomes difficult to even process. This century saw the birth of the tank, the submarine, and the strategic bomber. But the most significant development in the first half of the century was the chemical shell. During the First World War, the use of substances like mustard gas and chlorine turned the trenches into a landscape of nightmare. It was a weapon that didn't just target the individual. It poisoned the very air they breathed. It forced every soldier to carry a mask at all times, adding a layer of psychological terror that had never existed before. Chemical warfare was so devastating and so universally loathed that it led to some of the first major international bans on a specific type of weapon. But we can't talk about the 20th century without the atomic bomb. In 1945, the rules of human existence were rewritten in a single morning over Hiroshima. For the first time, humanity had created a tool that didn't just defeat an enemy, it threatened the survival of the species. The atomic bomb changed the nature of global politics forever. It created the era of mutually assured destruction, where the most powerful nations on Earth were too afraid to fight each other directly because the consequences were final. The 20th century was defined by this paradox. We had the most power we had ever possessed, and yet we were the most restricted in how we could use it. Now we are in the 21st century, and the nature of the deadliest tools is shifting again. We are moving away from sheer brute force and toward precision and autonomy. The MQ-9 Reaper drone represents this shift. It allows a pilot in an air-conditioned room in Nevada to engage a target on the other side of the planet with terrifying accuracy. The drone removes the risk to the operator, making the decision to use force much easier. But the 21st century is also seeing the rise of cyber weapons. Stuxnet, a computer worm discovered in 2010, was the first major instance of a digital code causing physical destruction to a nation's infrastructure. A cyber weapon can disable a power grid, shut down a water supply, or cripple a financial system without a single shot being fired. In this century, the most dangerous tool might not be a bomb or a gun, but a line of code. As we look back at this long and often dark history, first, every deadliest weapon is eventually countered. The shield was countered by the pilum, the castle was countered by the cannon, and the tank was countered by the guided missile. It is a constant game of leapfrog. Second, the distance between the attacker and the target has steadily increased. In the ancient world, you had to look your opponent in the eye. Today, you can engage from a different continent or even from a satellite in space. This distance changes the psychology of conflict, making it more clinical and less personal. Another theme is the democratization of force. In the Middle Ages, the most formidable tools were reserved for the elite who could afford the horses and the armor. Gunpowder changed that, putting the power to challenge kings in the hands of the common soldier. Today, decentralized groups can use readily available technology, like commercial drones or hacking tools, to have an outsized impact on world events. The barrier to entry for possessing a world-altering weapon is lower than it has ever been. We also see how the definition of deadliest changes based on the goals of the era. In the Roman times, it was about efficiency in close-quarters combat. In the Napoleonic era, it was about the volume of artillery fire. During the Cold War, it was about the potential for absolute annihilation. Today, it seems to be about the ability to strike with precision while remaining invisible. We are looking for the scalpel rather than the sledgehammer, though the sledgehammer is still very much in the arsenal. The story of these tools is really the story of human history. Our inventions reflect our fears, our ambitions, and our ingenuity. Each century's deadliest weapon was a response to the problems of the previous age. The longbow was the answer to the night. The airplane was the answer to the trench. The missile was the answer to the ocean. We are constantly searching for an edge, a way to ensure our own security or to project our influence over others. But there is a strange irony in this journey. As our weapons have become more powerful, our ability to use them has become more complicated. In the 14th century, if you had 1,000 longbows, you used them. In the 21st century, the most powerful nations have thousands of nuclear warheads that they hope they will never have to use. The ultimate weapon has become a tool of peace through terror. We have engineered ourselves into a corner where the only way to win is to ensure that no one ever starts the fight. Think about the sheer amount of resources, money, and brainpower that has gone into this pursuit over the last 2,000 years. Some of our greatest scientific breakthroughs have been byproducts of this search for better tools of conflict. The rockets that took us to the moon were descendants of the V-2 missiles. The internet we use to watch this video was originally a military communication network designed to survive a nuclear attack. The GPS that helps you find your way home was built so that missiles could find their targets. Our world is built on the skeletal remains of the search for the perfect weapon. It's also worth considering the human element. Behind every Gastrophetes, every longbow, and every drone is a person. The engineers who designed them thought they were solving a problem. The soldiers who used them thought they were protecting their homes or their way of life. The tragedy of history is that we are so good at solving the technical problems of how to exert force, but we are still struggling with the social problems of how to live together without it. As we move deeper into the 21st century, the dangers are becoming more abstract. We are looking at the development of autonomous weapon systems, often called slaughterbots. These are drones or robots that can identify and engage a target without any human intervention. This brings up profound ethical questions that the world is currently trying to grapple with. If a machine makes a mistake, who is responsible? If a war becomes a battle of algorithms, do humans lose control of their own destiny? The deadliest weapon of the next century might not be something we hold in our hands, but something that thinks for itself. Looking back at the 4th century BC, that Greek soldier with his belly shooter would be completely unable to comprehend the world we live in. To him, his tool was the pinnacle of human achievement. And yet, we are still basically doing the same thing. We are looking for a way to be more effective, more efficient, and more powerful than those who might oppose us. The hardware changes, but the human heart remains the same. The transition from the 19th to the 20th century is perhaps the most striking example of this exponential growth. In 1890, a soldier was still riding a horse and using a bolt-action rifle. By 1945, just 55 years later, we had jet aircraft, radar, and the ability to split the atom. That one lifetime jump is the most significant in the history of our species. It changed the very nature of existence. It made the world a place where every person on the planet is now connected to every other person by the thin thread of global stability. What is the common thread that ties the pilum to the cyberweapon? It's the desire for an unfair advantage. No one wants a fair fight. Fairness is for sports. In the life and death struggle of empires and nations, you want every possible edge you can get. You want to see the enemy before they see you. You want to hit them from further away than they can hit you. And you want your impact to be more decisive than theirs. This drive for the edge is what has pushed us from the sharpened stick to the laser-guided bomb. But it's also important to remember the defensive side of the story. For every deadliest weapon, there is an engineer working just as hard to create the deadliest defense. The longboat led to the development of the seawall. The bomber led to the development of radar. The nuclear missile led to the development of early warning systems. The history of power is a dialogue between the attacker and the defender, a conversation of steel and silicon that has been going on for millennia. As we wrap up our journey through the centuries, take a moment to realize how lucky we are that the most powerful tools in history are currently being held in check. We live in an era where the deadliest weapons are so formidable that they have, for the most part, forced the great powers into a long period of relative peace. It is a fragile peace, built on the back of terrifying technology, but it is a peace nonetheless. The weapons of the past are now pieces in museums, curiosities that we look at and wonder how people could have been so primitive. But to the people of the time, those were the absolute limit of what was possible. One day, 1,000 years from now, people might look at a Reaper drone or a modern tank and feel the same way. They might wonder how we could have been so primitive as to rely on such blunt instruments. History isn't just a record of what happened. It's a manual on how we think. The deadliest weapons in every century show us what we prioritized, what we feared, and how far we were willing to go to achieve our goals. They are the physical manifestations of our ingenuity and our flaws. As we move forward, the challenge for the next century won't be building a better tool of power, but building a better way to ensure we never have to use the ones we already have. From the first stone thrown by an early human to the latest satellite-controlled laser, the path of our development is a straight line. We are a species that uses tools to overcome our physical limitations. Those tools have made us the masters of the planet, but they have also given us the power to destroy everything we've built. Understanding the history of these deadliest weapons is more than just a hobby for history buffs. It's an essential part of understanding who we are and where we are going. The next time you see a statue of a knight or a picture of a modern jet, think about the centuries of engineering that led to that moment. Think about the thousands of people who worked to make that tool just a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, and a little bit more effective. It is a testament to our persistence, but it is also a reminder of the heavy responsibility we carry. Every 100 years, we create a new master of the field. The question that remains for us in the 21st century is what we will do with the power we have so carefully and brutally refined. History doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. The Gatling gun was supposed to be so terrible that it would make war impossible. The atomic bomb was supposed to do the same. Each time, we find a new way to live under the shadow of our own creations. We adapt, we evolve, and we keep searching for the next edge. It's a cycle that shows no sign of stopping. As long as there is a new century on the horizon, there will be a new deadliest weapon waiting to be born. The only thing we can do is try to learn the lessons of the past so we can navigate the challenges of the future. Thank you for taking this long, incredible journey through the history of power with me. The world is a complex and often dangerous place, but it is also endlessly fascinating when you look at it through the lens of the tools we've built to shape it.